test everything, so no matter what, we're gonna get a satisfactory product. Is that what you're saying?
Yep, that's our goal, yep. And like we say, we work with all sorts of different contractors and we get to the end result that we're willing to accept.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to accept Pemmer Company's bid.
Second.
Motion from Councilmember Heeman, second from Councilmember Peterson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. K7, resolution to consider awarding the bid for well number 4 project.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. So as I mentioned, this one, we bid at the same time. And this, we did only get one well driller, but we were more or less only hoping for 2. These are the ones that are booked out a year, and we, reached out, and they're literally, this is how well drilling kind of comes out. They kind of have the corner of the market, and if we want to get it done in a year, we're actually fairly happy with this bid, the way it ties into at least the rest of the project. And as I mentioned, once you add this to what you just awarded for the site work, the total comes out $123,000 under our estimated total, that we discussed with you guys in the past. That is also $500,000 less than we pre-budgeted for. And so, so once you look at it as a whole, and the fact that we got one of the respectable drillers to bid it and meet our timelines, we're fully recommending awarding this and moving forward, so we don't have, our continued problem with the reason for this is that firm capacity problem, getting this project in the ground.
So on the alternate 1 screen well, what are the pros and cons of the screen versus the conventional?
So it's really actually, we've been running into problems where there's like fine sediment that needs a different screen. And so we just want to have pre-planned for that as an alternate to deal with if it comes in. And it was more or less as part of our expected budget, like that's why it was in the budget. And it's just listed as an alternate, as the concept of the rest is kind of a lump sum, the way that this is bid. And it would make it the ability for us to just not do it if it's not needed.
Okay.
And that's why we laid it out this way. So our hope is we don't need it, but we also fully recommend awarding it now, and it's just broken out so that it can be used if needed, not likely used. It would be more of an if needed situation.
And that wouldn't be known until drilled?
We won't know until we're, pumping, yeah.
Does
You
the
won't know until
engineer,
you back flush it and clean it out. It's silt, and I'm gonna be honest with you, you can go through $80,000 worth of parts real quick if there's a lot of fine silt in there.
so is that something that the engineer would be deciding or the company that's doing the install?
So,
Or both?
So it's kind of both. So you do a test pump, after they kind of flush it out and verify that we aren't getting sand in our pumps. If you know our other pumps, I think at least 2 of them are running below what they could be capacity-wise because they suck sand. And so for those reasons, we are going into this being prepared to make it where we get as much pumping, capacity we can out of this. And so that's why we want to have it as an option. But we don't find out until you do that sample, and then you go, oh, we're getting sand. If we want to pump at as high of a rate as we can, this screen, we'll be the ones making the decision that from what we're finding, we needed the screen, or not.
Okay.
So we have, I'd have to pull up the resolutions to see exactly the dollar amount, but we have paid to have sand hauled out. That's why we end up with a big, large sand pile of that crystally sand over at Public Works. It's to do exactly what he's talking about. We do have an issue, and we do pay to remove it, so it makes sense to be ahead of the game.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I have one more question. So once well 4 is operational, you're talking about the other ones not being able to run at capacity. Can those ones can a screen be installed, or is it too late for that to be addressed?
So I don't know the very specifics of each of the 2 that I'm aware of that aren't quite at their max, but I believe we did that analysis and it didn't turn out to be able to do the retrofit that you would need to do, whereas this one wouldn't be finalized, when we're kind of putting the screen in to be able to do it easily now. When you got to do it after the fact, it's kind of a major adjustment. You either gotta run a new liner down the middle, and now your diameter of your whole well is narrower, and now you have suction problems, and I believe we did those evaluations on them individually as it is, because we do wanna get the max that we can out of them. And I just don't know off the top of my head if it was just strictly cost effectiveness was why we didn't do it, or if it was, it's not viable, you know, but,
I remember that conversation, it just, it wasn't viable.
yeah.
It wasn't viable.
Yeah.
The thing is, they go, when they drill the well, they go down with a casing. And that casing will be adequate enough to handle the screen. But so once the casing's down, that's when they test pump it. They haven't put the rest of it in yet. They've only done half of it. So once they find the silt issues in there, that's when they can put the casing down. The other one, like you said, all of a sudden now you're getting smaller and smaller, now your volume is cut. So it wasn't viable. It wouldn't have done us any good to do it.
Good question, though.
Motion to accept with alternate one?
All right, there's a motion on the, did you make a
Yes.
motion, George?
Yes.
Yes.
I cut him off before he finished.
What's that?
I cut him off, but
Okay.
I'll second it, whatever.
All right, motion from Councilmember Heeman, second from Councilmember Peterson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. On to K8, resolution to consider replacing the current beer cave door.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Thank you for having me here tonight. So I'm here to talk to you about the beer cave door at the liquor store. When we built this store, we did a lot of things right over there. The beer cave door was something that we could have done better. Just to give you a little bit of background, when we're moving freight from the back of the storage area to the front, we have basically a service door up front, and then we have the beer cave where you can fit pallets through with maybe a half an inch of clearance on each side. When we were doing the store setup, I remember having to bring pallets of the shelving around through the parking lot, through the front door, because we didn't have a way to get in there. That's a minor concern. The bigger concern is the door that the engineers put in there isn't meant for dealing with condensation. So when we get into the hot summer months, where there's a lot more humidity, and we have a lot more customer traffic, we have issues with puddles forming right in front of the beer cave door. That's one of the busiest parts of the store. And then there's also issues where the condensation actually builds up in the sensor to the door, so the door doesn't always open. So we have to worry about people slipping, getting hurt, liability on that. And then we also have to worry about whether people can actually get into the beer cave door. I don't know how many times I've been walking around the store and somebody's standing in front of the door, waving at the door, trying to get in. So we've been discussing replacing that for a few years. It's been on the capital improvement plan. It had been moved up to be addressed this year, so we went out for bids this spring, January. The bids came back a little higher than what we had set aside. So what I would like to see, and what I hope you guys would like to see, is to put a bigger door in there to address access from the back room. It'll be a lot easier for us and like beer vendors to bring pallets of beer out. I should add one thing when we have pallets coming out. The door we have now is, it's basically one single sliding door, and they have to break that open to make it wide enough to get through. So then oftentimes when they're putting beer away, that door stays open, so we're losing a lot of heat, or letting a lot of heat in there, losing all of our cold air. We've got air curtains on the backside to prevent that. If we had a sliding door, say like this 12-foot wide one, that would open and close, so we'd solve a lot of issues. We'd solve the condensation issue. We'd reduce our energy usage because we wouldn't have a door open all the time. There'd be less wear and tear on the door. There'd be less wear and tear on our HVAC equipment, and we wouldn't have to worry about people slipping and falling, cracking their head in the back, and having to deal with that.
Is there any resale value to the old door?
We don't know yet. I'm sure we could figure something out. I did talk to SCR about that, and we have the option to either let them take the door or we keep it and and, find another use for it or sell it. So,
You had said that the new door would be 12 feet wide, and you talked about energy savings. Is there a setting on that you can, for pedestrians, you can set that to open only a few feet or 6 feet or whatever, and then you can manually open it all the way? Because if you have that door open 100 times a day, let's say, and it's opening 12 feet versus 6 or 8, now you're actually going to use more energy throughout the day. Is there a mode that you can set that?
so that's a good question. I don't know if there's a mode, but the door panel itself is 12 wide, and there's gonna be 4 panels. 2 of those panels be opening, so the door opening width would be 5 feet and 1 3/8 inches.
Okay.
The energy savings would mainly come from the door not being left open when our beer drivers are, our delivery drivers are bringing pallets back and forth. Because you can tell them to close the dang door, but they don't always close the door,
Okay.
So that's where that savings would come from.
So it'll only open 5 feet and, what'd you say, 3/8 inches or whatever during a
Yep.
normal customer?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
It kills me to see an estimate or a bid for 50% over what we estimate. That's a pretty
too.
big, that's a
Yeah.
pretty big hit. And I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know if,
I hate it.
I don't know if there's any other vendors. I'm sure you reached out to as many as you could, but I don't see that as a fair bid.
Well, the bid actually increased in price from a couple months ago with everything else that's going on, so I don't see the price going down anytime soon.
And
I
just,
will add, excuse me, I will add that when that was placed into the CIP, because we know that this has been an issue, as Keith had stated from kind of the get-go, it was one of the very few things that were like, ooh, we could have done that differently when we built that project. And when that number was put into there, we thought it would be plenty, as Fire Instructor had included that in the CIP for a few years now.
And he usually overestimates on those types of things. He was risk averse.
Doesn't try to be under, that's for sure.
Right. I don't see it as a responsible bid. I would love to have it, but I don't know.
and just to clarify, that comes out of liquor store funds 100%.
Yep.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion approved by Councilmember Heeman, second by Councilmember Lundin. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Aye. Motion carries 3-1 on that.
Thank you.
Yep. I'm happy you're getting that door. It's too bad it costs so dang much money. I can't believe it's 30 grand for a door. Yeah, all right, that's true. Item K9, resolution to consider purchasing message boards for Bluebird Park. Stephanie.
Again, at the February 25th, 2025 Parks and Recreation Board meeting, they came to a consensus to make a recommendation to City Council to purchase message boards for Bluebird Park. Staff did contact the school and local scouting groups, among others, to see if they'd be interested in or have the time or ability to build us some, but they just didn't have that at this time without us waiting another year. And the recommendation was to have a large green message board at the entrance of Bluebird Park by the restroom over there, on the pathway from the parking lot. And then also 2 smaller ones mounted at the park shelter and one on the amphitheater for when people are renting those, so we can make notification that they're being rented and used at that time, as well as giving us another opportunity to share events throughout the park. The cost for all 3 message boards and shipping is $1,358.19, and that would be recommended to come from the Park Dedication Fund, and staff is just requesting your direction on this item.
I'm gonna say motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion approved by Councilmember Lundin, second by Councilmember Heeman. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. I think those are really handy. We have them at the county parks, and we post about the events and the rules and the physical map of the park. One thing we started doing now also is like QR codes. I think that's something that we should have on there if we can, just to promote, our Facebook or website or whatever events. K10, resolution to consider replacing the 2 shade structures at Rum River Meadows Park. So I would just like to preface this with saying this was a hot topic on Facebook. Not everything comes out perfect the first time. Mistakes happen. It actually wasn't a city mistake. The instructions that were sent with the shade were sent for a permeable shade structure, not for a non-permeable, so they did not signify enough pitch. So that's why it pulled up some water, and that was just an instruction error. I would like to, go along with this subject, but maybe change, the type of material and that, like, the design of it a little bit to make it look a little bit more visually appealing. I think it's a great option, very inexpensive compared to the roughly $25,000 it would be for shade structures of this size in the other option that we had talked about, which requires the same amount of maintenance every fall and every spring, having to take down the tarp and put it back up. So I think it's a viable option. We just have to figure out the best way to configure it.
I agree. I mean, it's a very inexpensive option. It never really got a really good go at it, because it was put up the first time. So I think we should give it at least one more go. Prove us, you know, if for the amount of money we're spending and a little bit of time they're gonna have putting it in, before we go and decide to spend $25,000 or better on a different type unit, I think we should give this one more try, especially since it's so inexpensive.
So
I concur.
I had printed out, the printouts kind of suck, but on the screen you can see there's the triangle shade ones, which is kind of what I was envisioning the first time, but you have to have more of them, obviously, so you have to have a little bit more posts. There's a bunch of different configurations. I suggest we get the permeable one this time. Last time I was thinking it would be nice for people to be able to stand out of rain, but at the same point, if we're gonna have pooling, it's just not worth the time, you know, to keep people out of the sun was the main attraction there, so. The triangle options, there's a bunch of different configurations that you can do. I don't know if we just want to leave that up to city staff. Some cities that I've seen a lot of cities have these in their parks all over the country. There's even some in Minnesota that do this and take them down and put them up like we do. Some cities alternate colors, so they have like a few different colors and they'll kind of make a design out of it or whatever. There's a lot of different options there. There's a 5-year warranty on these ones specifically, and as you can see, they're $52.99 for a 20 by 20, which is, I mean, that's pennies on the dollar. So if they last 5 years, you're talking $10 a year versus a permanent structure, you're talking $1,000 or more per year of depreciation on it. So I just think it's a no-brainer.
I have a neighbor who has one similar to this up, and he's going on 3 years, hasn't had a problem, no water in it. And we're just looking for some cheap shade ideas, and hate to move forward to that farmland we have, but I had an out-of-the-box idea that maybe we should look at planting some small trees in there, like a couple hundred of them, and if we continue having this land in the next 10 years, and we have some cheap trees to use in the future.
That's a good idea.
I'm not saying all the land, you know, designate an acre or two and plant some birch, some pine, whatever we can get, you know, whenever Public Works has some spare time. It's just an idea. We need trees.
I
We
think
need
that's a
them
good
bad,
idea.
and they're very expensive, especially if you want to put a mature tree in any
Thousands of
sort.
dollars.
It's just insane.
I do want to say that we do look on our properties for trees we can move from
Right.
areas to other parks, and so that's something we do annually and have moved a few around and are planning on doing again this year if we have viable trees. It's just hard to find the right size of ones sometimes. Going back to this and the post structures, we currently have 4 posts on each one where we know needs to be moved a little bit further away from the volleyball court. Where would you like to see that moved back further in the park, towards the rear of the park, so that it's just away from the volleyball court and on the other side of the playground? Would you like it down completely? And would you like 2 of these shades per the structure since they're already in the ground, kind of like shown in the picture? Or how would you like us to go about it, I guess?
So I think on the volleyball side one, I think it's too large for that space. And now if we're buying new shades, a different style, and we're gonna have to move at least one post, maybe we just make that one a little bit smaller so it doesn't intrude on anything. Just a suggestion.
Yeah, I was just thinking of that myself. If this one specifically is 20 by 20 by 20, it may not work for where the posts are located currently, so we might have to move them anyways.
Yeah, you might have to do a variety of 12s or 15s. I don't know. That's something that I think,
I think we could leave it to
Yeah.
Public Works.
Right.
The other thing, as I'm looking on this on Amazon, it does say frequently returned item. Is council opposed to us finding ones that don't say that? Sometimes that is helpful when we're looking at Amazon purchases, that maybe the the rivets or the, you know, the ring holes tear out easily in certain brands? Are you, as long as it's within this kind of a similar price range, are you okay if we look for ones that don't state that?
This one isn't on Amazon.
Oh,
This is an actual sunshade company.
oh, I'm looking at the exact same one on Amazon, sorry.
Okay. This one comes with a 5-year warranty. So, I mean, and the reviews they're 4.9 stars on this particular shade, but
They could be
It's
sharing
har-
the same picture, I don't know.
it's hard- yeah, it's hard to
I just looked at your
say.
picture and I was just found it.
okay,
So-
sure. Hard to say. I mean,
Yeah.
I think you guys can use your judgment on that.
And then do you have a specific color? Because this one does come in multiple colors. You want blue or something that complements the park?
Yeah, do they have it?
I think
Or
neutral.
playground
The blue on this particular company is kind of ugly. I think a more neutral color myself, but, or we could mix it up and do a tan and a brown and a burgundy or whatever.
We did have a green before because that park has more of those colors in
Sure.
it, so the playground, so that is why it was chosen. But it's up to you guys, whatever. Your direction.
Leave it up to city staff or park board.
Yeah, leave it up to the park board.
Okay, then yeah, we can do that because that's meetings a couple weeks away. But
It
so
is.
it's just how fast you want it to turn around.
Yep, sounds good. All right, we will move on to K11, resolution to consider approving complaint-based system.
So Mayor and Council, we have been operating on a complaint-based code enforcement, which also includes zoning enforcement as well, for a number of years now. Sorry, let me change this. And what we haven't had, though, is any language written in city code or by resolution that states exactly that we are doing complaint-based. So what I would like to do is to ensure that staff, I mean, we're doing it, but we should have it written down, so when we have members of the public come to us and say, where does it state that we are complaint-based? Because I don't think PD or I don't think zoning is doing anything about the issue, even though people haven't complained. So I'm open to suggestions. I put this as a business item because I want to ensure that I encapsulate the language that you desire. And then that'll be something that if people do ask, where does it state that? We will then have something that's council approved.
And to kind of sum this up, this was started in 2019, I believe, correct? So somewhere around 2019, so it's been the practice for 6
20
years.
Yeah, somewhere in there, 2020.
And our CSO right now is the one that takes those complaints, and they are an enforcement officer for complaints.
Yes, with the exception that they may start with code enforcement, the CSO. If it's zoning, it does come back over to Ms. Hillesheim's department, and she will, excuse me, track down what exactly, if it's MS4, if it's building, or what kind of issue.
Okay, so just because we don't have a compliance officer in our budget does not mean that we don't have someone handling this, correct?
Correct, it's always
Okay.
handled.
I'm just specifying that
Yes.
because it's not line itemed in the budget, but we still have people that take care of complaints. So I would like to say that if anybody has a complaint, please come to the city and make a formal complaint. That's the only way
Absolutely.
we can act on anything. So if you don't have a formal complaint in, we can't do anything about it, so.
And to piggyback on that, sometimes I hear from members of the public, well, I don't think anything's being done fast enough, is usually the caveat that comes right after that, did you do anything? And there is a lengthy process. If it's for an admin citation for zoning issues, et cetera, or if it's going for nuisance compliance for long grass or weeds or something like that. There's a lot of notifications that happen. We want to give people the opportunity to correct any issues or violations that they have. So it does end up spanning not days, weeks.
It used to be worse though when it was, the CSO used to go out. I'm gonna tell you right now, there was more complaints.
Oh,
About the CSO going
Yeah.
out and measuring grass and it's far better off where it's at right now and
Yes.
100% my opinion, but
I agree. It was unfair before and just not how you want to run a city. So I would make a motion to approve this.
I'll second.
Motion by myself, second by Councilmember Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Next, we will move on to consent agenda, moving up items L3, I believe it was. And Nick, was that your question on that one?
Yeah, my only question was, it talks about costs, but it doesn't specify over what time frame those costs are.
So those costs that go for the nuisance weed and grass abatement depends on if we have a complaint comes in. So when a complaint comes in, and Chief Myers can probably speak on this better than I can, complaint comes in, it's gonna go to code enforcement or community service officer, and if, once they do all the notifications, as I mentioned, for them to correct the issue and they don't, then the city is going to hire this company. So it depends on what lot, the size, commercial, residential, there's a lot of variables in it, but that's their rate that they're gonna charge.
So this is for ones that are reported for non-compliance, this is also for vacant lots too?
Vacant that didn't get mowed. So the 50 feet or whatever depending on what type of lot it is, it's for violations.
Okay.
the
I thought this was
property
for
owner.
city lots, but,
No,
Okay.
Public Works
All
does
right.
all city lots.
okay, thank you.
All right, if that's all on that, we can move forward to L6, resolution to approve police officer take-home vehicle program. Travis, can you I just asked to bring this forward just to get a rundown on it and I guess any specifics you have and what you came up with.
Well, everything's in there we discussed. The only thing that was a little different, we went to the city attorney and he recommended that MOA with the union. So that was something that I didn't foresee. So that's why that MOU is written, which I guess is actually more in stone anyway. So that's a little different. That was what he recommended, and the union, or he drafted it for the union, they signed off on it last week too. So that's kind of there. There's still gonna be a policy, I'm trying to scroll down on my thing too. But there'll still be a policy in our Lexipol that will mimic all of that, plus some more oversight in there. And if you look at that MOA, actually would expire at the end of this year. So that's, I think Holmgren had thought about that at one time. So it'll give us, whatever, at the end of the year, a few months here. Yeah, that's, and then the mileage reimbursement rate is based on, we had a hard time coming up with, a thing with that. So I looked at other cities and talked to them, and it's based on the IRS, like what they use for the fuel cost for the year, right? And then we use our mileage for the vehicles and extrapolate the miles per gallon. So that's where that comes from. And right now, it's similar to the IRS medical mileage. That's how they come up with that one, the medical mileage reimbursement rate. But recommended not to do the IRS regular rate because that's depreciation as well,
Right.
So it's more than that. So it's the reimbursement for the fuel. So that's where that rate, I haven't came up with it yet, but the IRS medical mileage right now is 21 cents.
21?
Yeah. So it'll be similar to that, I'd guess. I have to look and see what they actually have for the actual fuel rate.
So why do we not want to encapsulate depreciation as well for mileage? Like, I guess I was picturing as more like the standard was at 52 or 62 cents. That includes your, all your wear and tear on your vehicle, your fuel and all that stuff. Was there a reason for that?
Well, because the depreciation piece was the biggest piece in that didn't make sense, because if you buy a car right now, you drive it home, you just lost X amount of dollars, right? So you're getting reimbursed for that X amount of dollars that you never put a mile on your car because of depreciation over the lifetime of that vehicle. So that's included in the mileage rate for our IRS. So that wasn't applicable. So that's why that's not applicable in that piece. I was asking other cities on what they're using and why they're not using things, and so that's where that came up.
Okay.
I have a question. I know when we okayed this program, our thought was to help retain and hire new officers. But when I'm looking at this, and I'll take your opinion on this, to make it fair to everybody, instead of a guy that lives 16 miles out, and another guy 15 miles out, the guy 1 mile further is getting charged, what if, and I'll take your opinion on this, what if we just give every officer X amount of miles a week, 50? And then after that, they all pay. That way, nobody's singled out. And if they want to use it above and beyond that, then I don't know. It just was a thought I thought I should bring up because I thought it was more fair and it was even across the board. I don't know what you guys think of that.
I don't think
I
you
like
should be
that.
allowed to use it for anything other than getting home and getting to work.
And that's all.
Right.
Ours.
That's, and, you said, you brought up And then if they needed it for something additional, well.
Right.
I think he's talking about
Well,
miles
the
past
language was
50.
kind of sketchy and
So are you just suggesting that miles over 50, no matter who it is, they're gonna have to pay mileage, so that way?
right.
Okay. I think, I like that idea, because then then nobody feels like they're short-sighted or it's
Exactly.
not fair.
It just would apply to everybody across the board.
I guess I'm not following that.
I'm not either.
Well,
It seems like it's a wash.
Instead of putting a 15-mile limit on it, every officer would get 50 miles a week, and they're all held to the same standard. So that way, like if we hired somebody that was 16 miles out, the guy 15 miles out wouldn't have to pay. And I was thinking that really isn't fair, it isn't equitable to everybody. And I thought maybe looking at it this way might be a little better, and everybody would look at it more fair.
Yeah, you mean you could extrapolate that out, figuring there's 7 times 15 in 2 weeks, right? That'd be the normal thing. The 15 came from the city's personal policy as it's written right now. That's where that number came from.
We have a policy right now?
Correct, in personnel policy.
Okay.
Not for this specifically,
Right.
but for, it says employees taking vehicles home in excess of 15 miles, right? So it does talk, that's where the 15-mile mark came from, unless, I suppose by resolution, but I don't know if you'd have to change the personnel policy as well.
We don't currently typically use that. We have, for the people who take home city vehicles, it's specific to certain positions, so.
And I guess if you wanted to say 50 miles a week, that would be, we work 7 days out of 14, and so if you figure 3.5 days a week, it is 52 miles, is what the 15-mile radius is, so.
George, can I-
14.29. If you had 100 miles in 2 weeks, and they typically work 7 shifts in 2 weeks,
George,
Does that make sense?
George, are you asking that if they live 15, they get free driving back and forth, but at 16, they're getting charged the full amount?
That's how it's written.
It's written as only the excess of 15 is where it pays, so at 16, they just pay the 1 mile for their, it's only the amount above 15 that's charged.
I think he's saying so if you were to hire someone that's at 14 miles, and I guess it's just not, it doesn't seem equal when some people that live closer don't have to pay in, and people that live further do have to pay in, when they're all putting wear and tear on the vehicles and using gas. I think that's what you're saying, right?
Up to 15, the city's
I'll,
covering it. Beyond 15, the excess is what's charged.
I was just trying to think of a way that would be fair to people that.
like that is fair.
Lived a little further.
It is, you make a choice where you want to live.
But
I know.
because as Councilman Pierce is saying, if somebody's at 14.9, that's 0. If somebody's at or 16, they'd be paying 1 mile, right? Because it's 1 mile over that distance.
Okay.
And if we put the 50-mile thing, it's just a way worded differently, but it all evens out at the end. And I do like that anyway, because at least generically, it gives you an incentive to live closer to your community that you serve. So that's a good thing. And most of our officers do, all but one. Most of them live within the community. So there's that benefit too, as far as an incentive piece.
We had an employee with the city that lived way up in the north, way north of Mora, and he was taking a city truck home every day, and he didn't get charged anything. That's why a lot of that policy got changed.
I think it's just the statement, the council has determined that the city thinks it's best and fair for the good of the city, that they set this 15 miles, and we're gonna absorb any wear and tear for the 15 miles. We feel that that's fair, we feel that that's good for the city, good for the public. And then it's beyond that, we're like, well, we'll have you pay us back for the extra wear and tear beyond the 15. So I think it's fair.
But at 21 cents, it's not being paid back for the wear and tear, it's just being paid back for the fuel. That's
That's up to.
So I worry, I know Mike was worried about take-home squads and the cost of having to replace them more often. I'm all for it, but I don't know what sort of financial implications that would have for long-term maintenance on the vehicles, like especially if there's someone that lives 30 miles and, say they're driving 60 miles a day, multiply that times 4 shifts a week or whatever, that's 250 miles a week. So now you're talking quite a few miles over the year. Have you done any calculations on how that would break down, or are you not as?
There's something, it's hard to extrapolate exactly where that's gonna play out.
Okay.
As we mold our mileage across the fleet, like we discussed last time, just because, Luke, you're driving a car for this month, depending on how, even right now, as we do it now, your patrol patterns are different. You're putting on, say, 100 miles more than George is on a shift, hypothetically, right? So at some point, we're gonna probably swap those vehicles out just on the regular patrol side.
Right.
So we even them out the same as well. And it'll give us an idea. I'll be able to figure out, it's really hard to figure out, but we figure out the average per month type thing per officer with this. And I think we'll have a pretty good gauge at that coming up at the end of the year, right? So it'd be a good evaluation of that. When I was, one of our neighboring agencies that's done it for a while, I was asking them a little bit on their fleet management and how that plans out. Now, he doesn't have, I was asking him for data because he's given me his spiel on why his maintenance cost was lower, even with the higher mileage, just because of the responsibility of the vehicles that they're assigned to. But I'm like, well, can you give me something that shows that? And he's like, well, no, because we've had this program for, 7, 8 years now, so it's hard to compare 9-year-old data to now, so it's difficult there. But there will be more mileage on there. But if we figure it out, I think with this MOU goes to the end of the year, it'll be a good time frame to
Okay.
give us a few months to kind of dig into what is that actually changing in the fleet plan.
Okay.
I mean,
Thank you.
I don't envision a change to this change wouldn't have any changes in the fleet plan that's been laid out for the next 20 years unless we start adding more officers, right? So let's just say we stay stagnant. I don't envision, as far as the mileage piece, that we're gonna have to say, well, we're gonna have to squeeze those capital expenditures closer together. I don't see that happening, because I kind of came up generically with that, not on the dollars and cents side, but as far as the life cycle. And I don't foresee that, but we'll have a better gauge, at the end of the year too.
Okay. Thank you.
So, one last question. Since it's an agreement between the city of Isani and the law enforcement labor services, does that mean now, if this program didn't work out for any reason in the future, we're probably not getting it taken back?
That was my questions on this whole, with our attorney, and my questions with the union as well. If you read in that MOU, again, this is above anybody in this room's understanding. It talks about where there's a piece in there that nothing can be used. Let's see. It talks about where they can't use this as any negotiating piece or anything else like that. So I don't even know why they have it in there. But again, that's not my deal. So number 6 in the MOA, where it says this MOA shall not create any past practice or precedent. No party may refer to this MOA and any proceeding as evidence of a precedent or past practice, may not be used as evidence in negotiations, arbitrations, or any other proceeding. So I think that protects the city, so that's probably why our attorney wanted that in there, so that that piece is there. Because when we had the discussion with the attorney, generically, what he says is, if you don't have this, they could perceive it that way. They being union members and under a CBA. So this lays it out that it can't be perceived that way because both parties have agreed upon it, that it's not a contractual benefit.
Okay.
So that's why we
Correct.
laid it out to us.
That's exactly what it is. So
Okay.
Thank
if we didn't have an agreement that said that you can't argue the fact that if we take this away because we determined as a city that it was not in the best interest of the city to continue, they can't say, well, this was a benefit that we're getting, now you're taking it away, what are you gonna give me instead?
Thank you.
And it,
That's-
as well
that's
as the
what I
court,
wanted
we have the
clarified.
authority to terminate that person's ability, right? Under that same context, right? So that was the other reason for the MOA so we have the authority to say, you know what, George, you're not responsible enough, we don't want you to do that anymore. So, something like that. So that was for both of those pieces.
So it works for you too?
Yeah, and the union was okay with it, so, yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, Nick.
4 F and G seemed vague to me, so I was wondering if that'd be more clear in policy or where that would be laid out.
Yeah, I mean, the policy's gonna have this is what our attorney came up with, right? And, we have, well, the policy, as far as F and G,
What is secure?
locked,
Well, that, it says locked, but then it says and secure.
yeah. Locked, secured. So my interpretation would be that the vehicle's locked and the actual firearm is then secondary locked within there.
But then in G, it's saying that the vehicle shall be locked and secure. So secure is locked, but it's saying it's and secure. What's the and?
I guess we'd have to call Joe Langle, our attorney, and see why he wrote it that way. I have no idea what that means.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
So
They're
generally,
both the same thing.
generally your rifles are locked in your vehicle and then the vehicle's locked?
Correct.
Yes, okay.
So does this mean Public Works will have a lot more room in that garage?
Yay, more Illuminate stuff, huh?
Yeah, no, but in theory, yes. Yeah.
All right.
More for public works, not lights. There's no more room for lights, but there might be room for a plow truck or two.
All right, well, do you guys want to do a motion on this, just so we,
Well, you were having a discussion, you're gonna accept it, you're gonna accept it as the whole consent agenda.
okay,
Yeah, it is recommended, though, if we pull a consent item up into business, that we do vote on it.
correct.
first.
Motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion approved from Councilmember Lundin, second from Councilmember Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. Thank you, Travis, for the work on that. I think it's gonna be a great thing. So if people see squads around the community parked at their neighbor's house, I hope you feel a little safer knowing that they're right there. And then we moved item 13 up as well, a resolution to approve the hire of part-time custodian Joseph Anderson. I just have a question on that. Is that something that we usually have hired on? I was under the impression we did a cleaning service. Is this something separate, or what is this?
No, we've had a custodian for years. I believe that I'd have to look back exactly when that started, but I'm gonna think, if I had to guess, I think it was 2016 that we went with a custodian at the
Okay.
community center. We had a custodian resign. That was a few agendas ago. And now we've gone through the process of hiring someone. And actually, this custodian, particularly Joe, was a custodian we had in the past and does a very good job. And this is budgeted separately as a part-time staff person.
Okay,
Just for the community center. And we do have a cleaning service for the city hall.
got it, okay. I remember hearing something about it, but I couldn't remember what we had decided on it. Okay,
We have to vote on that now?
Yeah, if it's just clarification, I
Yeah.
think we're okay with it, leave
Okay.
it in consent. But if we're gonna be discussing the ins and outs, then I would prefer we vote on it.
Okay.
But just clarification.
so, all right, item number 14, for the sake of time, I guess, unless anybody has any questions on it, I didn't know if that's something that we could do, the ash tree survey. I mean, it's,
I asked to pull it out because my question when we were talking about this originally is how many ash trees do we have? That was what I really wanted to know. And then this says it will cover 500 ash trees. Well, how many do we have? That's what I wanted to do a survey on, so we knew what we were dealing with.
So we don't know exactly how many we have. Before, Matt Sylvester was approximating about 400 trees right away and public lands, city-owned property. And so what we did is I directed Mr. Becker to collect quotes based off 500 to make sure we had a buffer so we could compare apples to apples because we don't know what we have. That's why there's an additional cost in there if we want to survey all the trees, and then we will, in all the public lands, all the right-of-way areas, we'll get an exact number, but we don't know. So the survey will not only give us, I guess if we were just looking for a count and not the condition of the ash trees, that is
Right.
not what this is.
I see that.
so they'll tell us the condition and roughly how long each tree has left to live. Is that,
Yeah, and if you look at the one example
Okay.
that the one company put in there, they actually do a pretty lengthy
Okay.
summary report of what we're looking at. So if we are, as a city, are looking to potentially remove any of these trees in the future or possibly treat, there's a number of different things we could do. that this will let us know, like, how we can budget for that. What's the scope of work that we're looking at?
Yeah, that's Davies Resource Group.
Right.
They're pretty staunch on their tree stuff. They're all over.
I'm still not okay with this language. Can't we find somebody to take a couple of days and go through the whole city and count every ash tree on city-owned land and right-of-way? So we have a count? I still want to know a number that we're dealing with, so it's easier to figure out a figure in the future, or what we may be looking at. And if we're looking at only 500, what if there's 750? We're skipping 250. Nobody's ever given me a number.
They're giving you a quote for up to 500.
Right.
And anything over that, they're gonna charge X amount of trees that they see. So,
Or
I'm no
property.
tree expert, and I'm not gonna be able to tell you. I can stand next to 2 ash trees, and I'm not gonna know which one's which.
And we don't have an arborist on city staff, unfortunately, to do that. So we could get a count, possibly, but it might not be accurate because nobody's an arborist. They might not know an ash. I mean, they could probably figure out what an ash is, but they're not going to be able to tell us when this ash is expected to die, which I think is the most important thing for
Right.
timeline of removal and
Okay.
budgeting.
I'm not gonna venture to guess, because I don't know, because I didn't ask specifically how much it would cost to have one of their arborists drive around the whole city and do a count, but obviously it's gonna cost something. But,
Right.
and then beyond that, we'll have to do, this would be the next one.
Right.
So you're right, unknowingly, I skipped a step. But I do think that this will be a good idea for us now. Now, if we wanna stop at 500, with the Davy Resource Group, we're gonna know what areas they covered and didn't cover. So we could probably extrapolate from there if we don't wanna pay the additional. They're not per tree, but they are per site, so per parcel. We can have them not go to Legacy Park or go to certain areas until we hit the 500. Have them focus on right-of-way area first,
I
and
agree.
then go from the public property after that.
Can we do this? And I'd be okay with something like this. Do the 500 trees, and when they're done with the 500 trees, if they can tell us how many more trees we may need to do in the future, at least so we have a total count. That's all I want. And if they could charge us just a fee for the counting.
They have this listed here multiple times as a tree inventory. So that is what they're billing and for, is taking inventory.
It is gonna give the condition, though. as
Right,
well.
your additional
He
information, but
doesn't want the
this
condition, he just
is,
wants the number of trees.
right, which is what they're saying they're doing, it's tree inventory. So,
But George wants to know how much more over 500 we could potentially
I
go.
wanna
Matt has
know
said, Matt has
every
said,
tree.
Matt has said probably 10 times now, he originally thought about 400, and the more he drives around, the more he thinks it's more. So if it's 2,000 trees,
That's what I
then
wanna
now
find
you're
out.
talking about an extra
But
15 grand.
I think we could look at it this way. We could do 500 trees, and then we can say, okay, of the 500, what is the percentage of trees that are going to die in the next 2 years, die in the next 5 to 7 years, die within 10 years, or something like that? And no matter how many other trees, we know we have a problem that we need to address and how we're gonna address it.
The right-of-ways are the more crucial
Yep.
ones at this moment. You're gonna get out in the middle of the woods, and you may need, that tree may be so far gone now, it doesn't even matter to even count it. So I think the right-of-ways and open areas right now
right.
need to be looked.
Yeah, no, I'm not talking about like
And I can't
out in the
believe we got
middle of
over
a
500
wooded
trees in
area.
right-of-ways.
I'm not concerned about those trees. I'm concerned about any of the residential areas, and that's the only count I want, is
Well,
on,
and we'll be able to tell them,
right-of-ways.
don't go up to this neighborhood over here because it's new and we know we didn't allow ash trees to be planted. So we will be able to not have them spend their time up there, you know what I mean?
well, will he be able to at least give us a guesstimate after he's done how many more trees there's? I'm serious, like
And not
we've
unless
said,
he's,
is
not
there
unless
2,000?
he's
Is
going
there-
around looking, he's not going to give you a guesstimate. Because there could be 50 ash trees standing next to each other.
Well, I'm a no vote until I
I
get
bet
a
when
count
we-
on every ash tree that is in a boulevard and on city land, not including parks if it falls over and not in harm way. Because otherwise, we're just, I don't know where the money's going. I kind of want to know where the money might have to go in the future, that's
I
all.
have not worked with this company before, but when we typically see, when I've seen surveys and indicator dots put on parcels of what we're looking at, whether it's tree species or other things in the past, I think that when we look at that GIS map, we're gonna be able to see the hot spots, and we will know certain areas that have the number of trees. I think
Right.
that as a city, we could probably extrapolate how many more we're looking at without physically going out to look. It's not gonna be exact, but it's gonna be probably pretty close.
Yeah, if we're
What do you
within
think? But you're-
50
you could- you
trees,
could-
I'm good. I like to get within 50, 100.
Yeah, but I'm
Hundreds
just
count.
saying.
How about this?
Hundreds a lot.
How about this? We go ahead with this, and after he gets the inventory, if we have to stop at 500, you call him and you ask his opinion. Just get his opinion. Are there 8,000 more? Are there 100 more? I think he'll have an okay idea to
Okay.
settle your mind on that.
I'll go with that. I just,
Just
Or I
stop
can
it.
call
because we
or
need to start this
Stipulation.
process. We need to start the process and do
Okay.
some type of
I'll
inventory.
make a motion on this. I'll make a motion that we allow them to go up to 500 trees
With the-
at this point.
The low bid company,
The-
Davies. I
Yeah,
think. Yep.
Davies.
Yes.
I'll second that. Motion by Councilmember Lundin, second by myself. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I said aye.
Motion carries 4-0.
If he hits 500, it's, the cost per tree is actually cheaper if you were to do an additional bid.
Yeah.
Because the
It
10 per
is.
tree is more than the initial rate.
It's actually per property, not per tree also.
I motion
So,
to
yeah.
approve the consent agenda as presented.
Motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second on the floor?
Second.
Motion by Councilmember Lundin, second by Councilmember Heeman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Consent agenda is approved 4-0.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn by Councilmember Lundin, second by Councilmember Peterson. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 4-0. We are adjourned, and we will pick up EDA. Sorry for the wait, guys. This was a big agenda.